Hey everyone, welcome back to the Promised Land podcast with me, Scott Saunders, for a slightly different edition of the show today. You might be used to me talking down the lens or talking down the mic on my own, rambling to myself, but I'm joined by a very special guest, Twitter menace, self-referred, Manchester United fan. You may know him, quite prominent on social media nowadays, Adam Joseph. Thank you very, very much for joining me, mate. We're just going to shoot the breeze about what's happening at Manchester United at the moment. Welcome to the show.
No, thanks for having me. It's an honor. Obviously I'm a long time Promised Land listener. It feels strange being on here, but really appreciate it.
We're just going to look today at more of not a state of play, but the burning question, I guess. Are Manchester United moving too slowly in the transfer market? Because they've only done, as we record this, it's July 1st in the morning. We don't have any confirmation yet on Bryan Mbeumo's move to Manchester United. They're still negotiating with Brentford. But we expect this one to get done. I guess we do expect this one to get done. But still, that's not enough for people, is it? That's not enough for people. Is it enough for you so far, Adam?
It's a tricky question because, two signings, one official, one not, aren't really enough. You want them on the preseason tour. Ideally, we'd like to have, everyone on the plane for preseason. You remember what June 1 was like, Cunha. And then June 2nd was the first time Ornstein tweeted about Mbeumo. And then everyone's like, well, what's going to happen the next day? And then all of a sudden it's July 1. So from that lens, you can understand the frustration. But for me, I guess you sort of have to understand the reasons behind why we're here. So I like someone said yesterday, are you happy with United's window? I said, well, I'm not going to judge it at the end of June. So things accelerated last week. We started to see some momentum with Jadon Sancho. And I know you said on the crossover pod that you think that Juventus or an Italian club will be the end result. I'm sort of feeling the same. You find that middle ground. We're seeing some progress with Anthony. Rashford's waiting for Barcelona. One club option is very difficult to pull off. Garnacho, we're starting to, Laurie Whitwell reported last night about Chelsea. Seems like Premier League has the cash and the club's interested to do something. So let's see where we are in a week. I sort of feel like we get too caught up in judging it as it is right now, never giving it a chance to breathe. So it is a little tricky. So I do understand the frustration. I probably just don't quite share it as much as other people do.
Yeah, I think that's Adam and I think from understanding, kind of your points of view that you express on as your Twitter menace self, it's, but I do find that the reason why you're on the pod today is you promote a lot of the right messaging, and it is really important to retain that at such a difficult time. But because I have some questions, I have a slight running order talking about how transfers have changed in this kind of thing over the last few years and how different it is. And you mentioned they're judging the window at the end of the window, not at the end of June, and all the circumstances that have led to United getting to this point in the first place and how difficult it is for them to kind of do the business that Liverpool are doing or City have been doing. We could talk about Man City, but maybe not on this, but you know where I'm going with that, right?
Yes.
It's completely different circumstances. But yes, that's what we'll be getting into on the podcast today. Please subscribe to it on Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube as well. All the links are in the description. Please follow me on social media at @_Scott Saunders and at TPLMUFC. Adam, where can people find you just before we get started?
Yeah, on Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, at Adam Joseph with 4 underscores. It's all I could get with such a common name.
4 underscores. I had to sell for 2, but
that's all right. That's not bad.
Well, I had one at one point, and then on another platform, I wanted them all to be the same because I'm on different platforms, like TikTok, even though I don't post, Instagram, even though I don't post really, and I couldn't actually get the single underscore on all of those. So then I ended up changing to 2 underscores because I could get them all on those different platforms just to make it easier for people to follow. But yeah.
All I could get on Instagram. I'm not too old for TikTok. My wife sends me TikToks. I don't know much about it. But yeah, it's the only way I could get both on Instagram and Twitter was to go with this. So it's what I settled on.
Yes, please give us a follow if you've not done so already. Get in the comments as well on Spotify and on YouTube as well, and let us know what you think about this window so far. That's what we'll be talking about from the start, and maybe get into, the meltdown that is currently happening, because United haven't done 6 deals by July 1st. But look, just to start with, I guess, Cunha done, Mbeumo done. Like, by the time you listen to this, maybe we do have kind of that deal agreed. And I think I said on the podcast yesterday that I did, it was, I do expect this one to be done, like, probably over the next week. We are that close, right? Obviously, deals are 60 odd million quid that we're talking about, give or take, on add-ons and this kind of thing. We don't know exactly where we are as we record this, but we expect it to fall in that ballpark for Mbeumo, similar to what United have paid for Cunha. Smart moves for you?
I don't think they could have spent that much money in a better way, realistically. So if you could find me 2 proven Premier League performers, so let's just say 125 million pounds, how much better are you going to do? You're going to sign Eze from Crystal Palace, targets like that Arsenal are targeting now. I when I look through it through that lens, and I think the most important thing was finding those proven Premier League performers. Of course, now we have to cling to XG over performance and really harp down on it now that it's 2 Manchester United players potentially at the top of that list. I don't think they could have done better. It addressed clear areas of need, and it's first 11 quality players, which is what they really needed to target. I think you can have a deep squad like United have, but they didn't have a lot of quality in there, and that was the biggest issue. So to me, I don't know how they could have done better, apart from maybe signing a midfielder or a goalkeeper, but there's obstacles to signing a goalkeeper because you need to get rid of your current one because of their current financial situation. People are like, well, just tell Onana to leave. Well, he's on pretty comfy wages, and only a few years into his deal. It's just not that simple with the scenario United are in. I don't think people want to account for the fact, and we do get frustrated with this. It's modern football finance, so it's not as simple as just buying and selling as you might want to do. We can't just terminate contracts. Can't just give Jadon Sancho 13 million pounds in wages to leave. The club only has 73 million pounds at the end of Q3 finances in the bank. So I think people misunderstand the difference between cash position and PSR position, which are 2 different scenarios, and one's much healthier than the other for Manchester United.
Yeah, obviously that is, you have to be a football fan nowadays. The old or the new saying goes, you have to understand football finance as well. And a lot of people would much prefer that not to be the case, and they just like to concentrate on the football. But obviously it's such a big part of the game. It's an industry in itself, transfers and talking about finance, and seeing Aston Villa sell their women's team to themselves, and Chelsea did it a while ago, and this is where we're going. If we're not there already, it doesn't. It's not fun, is it? It's not fun. But in United's case, especially, like, just on Mbeumo, obviously, as I say, we're recording this before any confirmation has happened. It might be that we're waiting 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks for this. I don't know. Or it might be done by the time you're listening to this. But regardless, United have had a habit over the last few years, 10 years, I would say, of dragging deals out. And that has kind of embedded in the mindset of United fans a level of incompetence. And I'm not saying that the new team in charge certainly have some proving of themselves to do, and the team that was in charge before, I think you can probably say there was certain levels of incompetence with some of the transfers that they tried to pull off. So obviously I think what's in fans' minds at the moment is, this is what we used to do and it's not worked. Why is this one taking 4 weeks? Because, they're only a few million apart. Just pay the money and get it done. But as you mentioned there, talking about cash position, this kind of thing, what is it for you that is different now with United taking 4 weeks to sign Bryan Mbeumo or whatever, compared to when they spent an entire summer chasing Frankie de Jong and not getting him just a few years ago? So, I think for me, it's differences in personnel, but maybe not everybody understands that or doesn't want to understand that.
Well, yeah, I think the fact the Glazers are still at the club are always going to cloud that perception a little bit. But I don't think people give enough credit to the fact that those people, coordinating the transfers are entirely different now. So I think it's not as much as, chasing shiny toys around Europe like Frankie de Jong. It's the difference now is because of the cash position. So with the Bryan Mbeumo deal, the reason it's dragging out is guaranteed fee up front, guaranteed cash given up front in that first year or up front. And then structuring the deal in a way that Brentford are happy with and that United can live with from a cash position so they can still do other deals. Like, you can have 73 million in cash in the bank. You cannot spend it all on those 2 transfers. You have to pay other things. All that is for everything else the club spends cash on. So it's a little more complicated. They can't just do a Harry Maguire and hand over 80 million pounds to Leicester up front when they had 300 million pounds in the bank. Those times are gone. But also that administration or that management team is gone. So sometimes I think you have to completely remove it. Like, you can point to the Ugarte deal and how that dragged out. But I think you just have to sort of give a little bit of wiggle room. You can still be in prove-it mode, right? You can still want them to prove your cynicism wrong, your negativity towards it wrong. But I just see it a little bit differently, because before we were just trying to sign, let's just say, best player in the Bundesliga, the shiniest toy in Serie A, like a Mkhitaryan, a Sancho, things like that. I think it's a little bit different now. And the reason deals are dragging out is far different. It's not chasing an unrealistic target. It's doing a deal that allows the club to still operate this summer to do other deals, because they know they have other deals. So Barada talked about this. Sorry, I'm dragging on a little while, but Omar Barada talked about this with Andy Mitten on United We Stand. He said sometimes fast isn't always best on those deals. And I'm in the middle on that one, because I don't think you can drag out Mbeumo till August, but you need to do the right deal so that there's still movements to be made this summer. Like, I think there's great value in the goalkeeper and the central midfielder market in that mid-price, 20 to 30 million, even below range. And if you want to do those deals, you need to keep some cash in the bank to do them.
Because as well, obviously, there's no guarantee, given the delay so far in actually selling players, that those players will be sold before August. Like, I think probably we will get some solid movement over the course of the next month, so United can reinvest that kind of money. But like you say, if they go and spend all their cash on 2 transfers and then don't sell anyone, they're going to be not able to get anybody. And other clubs are going to know, hey, United don't have any cash, so we can drag this out and get the best deal for ourselves that we possibly can, because United are stuck, essentially. And it's a difficult thing to balance, I think. And, I think I completely agree with you there. I don't entirely agree with what Barada has said, because of the need purely to get Amorim, or give him the best chance to actually start the season. Because that first game against Arsenal, if United lose that 2-0, 3-0 or whatever, we're just right back to where we ended last season straight away. So United need to start the season with... No, I'm not saying they have to win it necessarily, but they have to put in a performance that people can believe in. And the best way that they're going to do that is by giving Amorim as much time in pre-season as possible, with as many players as they can get in that suit his system. So, look, I think you mentioned Ugarte there. I just wanted to throw this question in. What's your take on... Because I know where I stand on this, but like last summer, United made a bunch of transfers and they flip-flopped on Ten Hag, eventually gave him a contract extension, and then probably signed some players which Ten Hag wanted and some players which maybe were club signings. And then Ashworth left after 5 months, after they spent months trying to get him in. There's been a lot of upheaval, even though it seemed like it was settled this time last year. Do you think now that... the fact Ashworth left anyway, I think it kind of points to, for some people, more incompetence. But do you see it that way, or is it they recognized that this situation wasn't ideal and they rectified it straight away and got rid of it straight away, and now they've turned a page and moved on a chapter? Like, I think for me now, we've got more of a settled unit in there that knows what they want, I think.
I agree. So this is your first summer with Barada, Wilcox and Vavell all in place in those roles. And I don't know whether they decided it was better just to acknowledge that the Dan Ashworth appointment was a mistake. It could very well be, and this has been reported, that it was a Ratcliffe sort of led decision. So maybe there was just they didn't all fit, and maybe less hands. Maybe less is more. Moving Wilcox into the director of football role and things like that. I would rather they acknowledge a mistake and action on it than leave it be. So I understand if people look at that and see more incompetence. I think there's 2 sides to it, though. I think you can acknowledge that maybe you've made a mistake and that structure is not what you envisioned. So they went for this real big, strong, powerful structure and decided there was too much crossover between roles. So instead of Ashworth, Vavell is like a consultant or a temporary role, and Wilcox, it's like maybe we're better off with Wilcox and Vavell. So why don't we just give them the summer to see what they can do with that? I think that already Vavell has shown what he can do with lower transfers like Kone and Heaven, and Wilcox has played a role in those, has been reported recently. So I think like they've at least earned the summer. I don't like, I'm just one of those people who doesn't feel the need to just keep judging them with every passing day and every passing week. I like to see things in their totality, because I guess it's like we live in an era of hysteria, and that's what keeps the content cycle churning. And I've spoken about this a lot, spoke about it yesterday. We need to be outraged about something. And I think that content, whether media driven or fan content driven, preys on the frustration of fans, particularly a club like Manchester United, which is always at the forefront of the media circus. We just need to keep it going somehow. And sometimes that's what they're doing, and it preys on people's emotions.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely segue actually to the next section. I'm not sure whether that was intentional or not, but
No.
it's we live in a different age, right? And like we've worked in media. Like I've spent 10 years working in media, like running a website that had millions and millions and millions of views each month, and you get breakdowns of the numbers by tags and this kind of thing. There's only one club at the top of that. There's only one club at the top of that. There's only one club that maybe Liverpool are getting there now. I'm not entirely sure. But for me, those two clubs are so far above everybody else in terms of interactions and interest and this kind of thing. And I often say, if you get a positive Man United story, Man United fans want to read it or watch it, or however it's distributed, they want to engage with it if it's positive. If it's negative, everyone else who doesn't support Manchester United want to read it, as well as the Manchester United fans who are probably looking through their fingers and thinking, oh God, I have to be up to date with this. But also it's in the interest of other fans from other clubs to see United's demise. And obviously we've been living through that for a number of years now. Let's hope it can turn around. But yeah, social media is an amplifier of absolutely everything nowadays. And it like transfer windows are so different. Because it seems like every second of the day something has to be happening. Like I've joked recently that Romano has said United are in constant contact over Brian Mbeumo. Constant. What does that paint the picture as? It's like we are talking 24/7. Like, probably not the case, is it? Like, if it was that concentrated, they probably would have arranged that deal by now, you would think. But it paints the picture that something is happening at all times, and it makes people expect things really, really quickly. For me, how do you deal with it? Do you find it frustrating, or do you understand? Do you find yourself having to separate it? Do you get sucked in? How do you deal with it?
Oh, I get sucked in. I live that nightmare every day. But I understand it. I understand why the media positions itself the way it does. So, recent example is Simon Stone and Cheeto, and how Man United fans responded to that and pointed out that. But I think if you look at the way that Manchester United fans point out when there's a signing announcement and the positive interactions that gets on United social media, the fans love good stories, but the biggest stories on Sky and BT Sports and take your pick of the major media outlets are the negative ones. It's the bait on ESPN FC, things like that. Fan channels, a lot of them, they follow the AFTV model where, baiting negative interactions and outrage content wins. And unfortunately, because they're the most hated club in the country, and probably the world of football, I would say, just by the English game's growth through the planet, people in general love to see other people struggle. So unfortunately, people aren't always inherently good, and that extends to football tribalism. I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but football, social media amplifies it to the biggest extent. We live in a moment-by-moment transfer industry where it can be Manchester United and Brentford are continuing to talk about Brian Mbeumo. Like, no shit. Thank you, Fabrizio Romano, for just changing the wording on your stories, and it spits out these impersonators like Plettenberg, and I don't want to name too many names and make myself unpopular. But we just see all these people, and then you have aggregators. Now, I don't have a problem with aggregators unless they only take the juiciest parts of quotes to, again, outrage bait fans. But we live in this era where you need updates literally by the hour. Like, surely we're getting an update today, but aren't clubs working on multiple deals? I'm sure Brentford are. I'm sure Manchester United are. They're trying to engineer departures. So they're also trying to organise loans. They're also trying to organise other players. So you might just be speaking once a day, or you might be coordinating it through an agent. You might be asking Brian Mbeumo's agent to start putting some pressure on Brentford. You might be trying to organise the finance for the deal. So it can be all sorts of manner of things. So, well, one thing United are trying not to do is use the company credit card and use the revolving credit facility again. That's another part of the deal that people don't want to acknowledge. So if they use the company credit card, that costs more than 65 million. That costs the interest payments that they have to pay on the credit facility. It's just so much more complicated than fans want to acknowledge. So I'd rather get my updates when there is something to talk about, like a second bid being lodged, because there's so much more to talk about, but we just want to talk about a change in wording and where we are with negotiations. That, they're discussing add-ons now. Well, no shit. They've probably been talking about that the whole time. So I'm a bit of both about it. I'm on the roller coaster like everyone else. So I guess I can't be too much of a hypocrite about it.
Yeah. Just speaking as well from the perspective of doing a podcast, like just speaking about myself and how my adjustment has gone from doing this like a couple of times a week or whatever it was, or once a week at times to twice a week, to wanting to do more of these each day. Obviously, this is an industry in itself now, and people want to do a daily show, for example. So that does mean that there's going to be rumors out there, and we're going to talk about what's out there and what's happening. And Manchester United, of all the clubs in the world, probably get linked with more players than anybody else. And that's not always through what Manchester United are putting out there. There were points in the past where maybe Manchester United were putting those out there just to kind of turn favor, I guess, and they're trying to get people on side because we know that they played the social media game over the last few years. But there's a lot of clubs and players and representatives of like agents of players and this kind of thing who do plant United's name in stories and make extra buzz around them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but it just creates an expectation that United have to do everything straight away. And one thing that also doesn't help is the fact that, as I touched on already in the pod, Chelsea are signing João Pedro now. Like, how many forwards do they have? 15? I don't know.
Yeah, 14 for 4 positions. Yeah.
Crazy, right? You got City, who've done all their business, and as we record this, have just been knocked out of the Club World Cup by Al Hilal, which is
a good morning for everyone. Yeah.
And obviously, Liverpool as well have gone and signed 2 fullbacks, and I fingers crossed, right? The thing with Florian Wirtz, he could turn out to be like a fantastic signing for Liverpool. He is a very, very good player, but it does scream a bit for me, Liverpool spending big money on a big player, and there's going to be that weight of expectation on them to deliver week on week on week, like we've seen with when United paid £89 million for Paul Pogba. Everybody expected Paul Pogba to score 20 goals and have 20 assists like every single season, because that's the kind of player that he should have been in many people's eyes. But, they have moved faster. City, Liverpool and Chelsea, they have moved faster than United so far in the summer. Is it wise to kind of compare that? Do you understand why people get sucked in? But what are the differences for you between those clubs and United?
Yes. Firstly, I understand why we compare. I mean, look at us as individuals and how we always compare ourselves to others, but I don't always think that's wise either. So I don't think it's ever smart to compare yourself to other clubs. I think you're asking for trouble in that instance. And I think it's also tough for Manchester United fans to accept that Manchester United aren't really like Manchester United right now. So they are in the fact that they can attract the likes of Matheus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo, but they've also just come off finishing 15th and have no European football. They have probably a quarter of what they had in the bank in previous years. So they can't operate in the transfer market the same. So we can rattle through each. So let's start with Chelsea. Chelsea have the best PSR position of anyone because of their loopholes, but also their massive success selling players. So what that allows them to do is to go to Brighton after Newcastle have already matched an asking price and go, we'll just give you all the money up front. which is what I assume they've done. Also worth keeping in mind that Chelsea pay more in agents' fees than any other club in England and in Europe across the last few years. If you look through all the FA reporting, City and Chelsea pay far more than any other club, almost twice as much as any other English club. So that matters. That also helps agents steering their clients towards certain clubs to get deals done. And so it's just a little bit different. And it's the same with City because they are cash rich. Helps when you're owned by an entire country. You can just give money up front. That's why their fees are lower, because they're paying all the money up front. They can afford to with the amount of headroom they have in their revenue streams, artificial or not. Then Liverpool are really doing what Manchester United would be doing if they were operating at the top level. They would be making those signings quickly and cheaply. That's the model United should be moving towards, where they're able to act quickly and decisively because they can negotiate fees upfront because their revenues are really strong. Like their revenues have really improved. And what they're doing they're turning that into cash buys. So that's the model United hope to get back towards. And I'm not saying they hope to become Liverpool, but that's the model they're trying to get back towards with fixing up their operating profits. Like the operating profits in Q3 were looking so much better because, unfortunately, as we know, because of the cuts they've made across the board and even just saving cash on loans. So what we saw in the Q3 results is moving Rashford and Antony out in January saved them a bunch of cash in the bank. So while it's not ideal necessarily to not be able to sell Marcus Rashford, as you and Ed were actually discussing, just getting his wages off the books would be massive from a cash position over the next 12 months when you consider how many revenue streams United are going to lose without Europe in terms of match day revenue, broadcast revenue, things like that. So that's how you fill that hole. So it's not wise to compare because, unfortunately, in the current position that we're in, as humiliating as it is, as embarrassing as it is, we're not there. And the only way that we get back there is being responsible and considered. But also, like you said about Omar Barada's comments, you still have to get things right and on time. So they still have to prove us wrong and get business done. I think every player needs to be in the door by the first game. Maybe they won't have all the outgoings done. Maybe Marcus Rashford's still waiting to become Barcelona's backup number 9. I'm not really sure what's going to happen there now that he's telling everyone that they're doing those drills. Hopefully other clubs come to the party, being that we saw in the Athletic last week in the deal sheet that there are multiple clubs interested. So maybe he'll be willing to look elsewhere. Inter Milan might get quite desperate with what's going on with them, but they are also in a bit of a financial hole. I'm off track again, I'm sorry. But
no, you're well on track, to be fair.
The point is we shouldn't be comparing because right now, mistakes of the past are holding up the club moving into the future. So we have to acknowledge where we are and the mistakes we've made to be able to move forward. And as much as you have to swallow that, and that's difficult, I find it much healthier for myself to swallow that bitter pill than get frustrated every single day with what isn't or is happening. Like what you were saying about players putting themselves out there. Look at Ivan Toney. So the Ivan Toney story that broke in the last sort of 24, 36 hours, if you trace back through those media stories and you just click on the articles, there is no credible source for that. So that is just an agent doing a journalist a favor. You know this as well as anyone, how that all works. It's the same with how Emi Martinez was mainly through agents to get that going. Then all of a sudden people are like making really harsh judgments about what's happening with Emi Martinez. So it's all a bit
on that topic, actually, there was another story last week. Obviously, we know what with Victor Gyökeres, we know what's been established with him and his preferences and this kind of thing. And last week, I think it was, again, aggregators who, or somebody who had reported that, hey, Victor Gyökeres opens the door back up to Manchester United or something like that. I saw that. So I went on a search. I looked at the website that, you have the aggregator, the line, open bracket, the source, tag, close bracket. Look at the source, go to the website, find the story. And that's reported as, that's what reports in Portugal are saying. But if you look at what the report actually said, it was the line that have been quoted, but actually sourcing stories from England. And that's how the cycle goes. And it kind of like lofts up this misinformation loop, of people speculating it's an endless cycle. Like people who are speculating in the Daily Mirror or something like that, saying that this could happen, then that gets lifted into another country's media, and then reported as this is what that country's media is saying, even though it's originated from somewhere else. So that
Reports out of Italy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's so much nonsense that goes out there. There's so much nonsense. But, I think we just, on comparisons and this kind of thing, City and Chelsea are completely different. I think the way that Chelsea have done really well to kind of sell the players that they've sold, even though there's an argument to say that they've ripped the soul out of themselves. And like, we don't want United to get to that point.
Gotta have a soul to lose a soul.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Right.
Haven't had a soul for 20 years.
But selling academy players, that is incentivized by PSR, basically. So whether those rules change eventually, I don't know. But United have to be smarter at that. United have historically been crap and terrible at selling players. Terrible. You see some of the transfers that have been made in recent years, like sales-wise, and like Dan James is the only player they've really made an actual profit on. There was that at some point. Obviously, since United made that record sale of Ronaldo in 2009, they've been terrible sellers invariably and haven't kept up with, like, the fact that they haven't really had players who've signed and improved themselves meant that they've been taking hits on almost every player that they've signed. Apart from if Bruno had left for Saudi, then that would be one exception to the rule. But generally, that's
another market we haven't
goes.
profited from, like other clubs. We've fallen behind in all those manners, right? So, like what you're saying about, the sales, for me, never had to worry about selling for expense because of the revenue stream. So we weren't so dependent on it. But we've fallen behind those trailblazers, unfortunately, in Chelsea and City. But also, because those clubs have operated from a position of strength and success, it means that they have leverage in those transfers. So you're paying a premium for talent from a successful club. United have never had that in the last decade. And they've already been poor sellers. It just amplifies these huge problems we have. We've fallen so far behind because we've relied on who we are or who we think we are for too long.
Yeah, and I think, look, this is a United podcast. We don't like Liverpool, obviously, but I think that the difference for me between City and Chelsea and Liverpool, like the way that Liverpool have actually done it and have taken themselves from where they were in 2014 or whatever, or like, after they lost the title or around that period where they had like drama on ownership themselves, they have built from the bottom up and essentially done a lot of things really well that United should have been doing and probably United need to start doing from now. Like you look at them fetching as much money as they are for Jarell Quansah, at the moment, and think, that's crazy. But at the same time, they have a history of doing this. Remember, Rhian Brewster was sold to like Sheffield United for a lot of money. Kelleher has come through their academy and has been sold for like 20 million quid or whatever it is. All these sales really, really help. And like Liverpool have, I don't want them to win the league. I didn't want them to win the league last year, but you have to just sit back and look at it and just, they've been incredibly well run, even though people have been really, really angry. Liverpool fans have been really angry at the lack of movement from FSG and the way that they've done things. It's the smart way to operate. And I think what the difference with United at the moment is they probably need to follow that same line, but they're coming from such a position of weakness based on the mistakes that they've made in the past that it will take some time, won't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it will take some time. And I think the one thing you can give credit to FSG for is that they appointed the right people. So Michael Edwards was a key appointment in that. It's come back operating a little bit differently, spending much bigger than they did before, I would say. Before they were sort of operating out of what they were selling. But again, like you said, they're selling these players and United aren't doing that. So I think one thing that United fans sort of are hesitant towards is turning the academy into like a farming system, the way that Chelsea have done it. But that's just sort of the reality because not all your academy products are going to make it through. So you want to move them on. You want to build great young men and players and then guide them onto what's next. Like not everyone's going to make their breakthrough. The prospect of a breakthrough is actually really small. What happened with Marcus Rashford was so unlikely for a player to break through and score the 4 goals in the 2 games and launch the way he did. But the players who don't have that breakthrough, you can get a tidy profit and then reinvest that in the first team. That's the way football is now, whether we like it or not.
Just some thoughts on, obviously we spoke about transfers and maybe I'll ask you if there's any players in particular in a second that you'd like to see join United, but obviously with the circumstances known that United don't have that much wiggle room at the moment, maybe go by positions towards the end of like positions that United need to target. Just a word on Amorim before we move on. Like, how do you find the conversation around him over the last few months? And have you been in the camp of he needs time? How much time will he have if he starts next season the way that United finished last season?
I'm probably more balanced than I expected to be. Like I think we can all acknowledge that that goodwill is now gone. So there's no room for a slow start or anything like that. That was eradicated by the Europa League final and the poor league form and everything like that. But I also acknowledge that he was the janitor for years of mistakes, and trying to clean that up is an impossible task. And really, last season was about starting to figure it out into this summer. But they have to hit the ground running in some sense. The fixtures make that tough, and the first 11 games make that tough. But the first 11 games before that, those 3 international breaks is what I'm referencing. But I think that you've got to give him the chance now to do that. I'm not like Amorim out. I think that's ludicrous. I think it's short-sighted, and I also don't like the discourse around that Amorim's choosing players because he's not, because they've moved away from that. We're not doing what Ten Hag did, or buying players for Amorim's system, because we're not. We're buying players who can play in tactically flexible systems. So I just wish sometimes when we had that discourse, we could apply a little bit more critical thinking, understanding that Matheus Cunha can definitely play in more setups than Amorim's, that Brian Mbeumo can play in more tactical setups than Ruben Amorim's, and that we are starting to get things right, but we still have a lot to prove. We're coming from a long way back, but we're in as good a position to do it off the pitch with that structure we've put in place around a manager for the first time. So why don't we give him the chance to do that? And I think you have to at least give him the season, unless that league form continues without you have to be on an upwards trajectory from day dot as soon as the season starts.
I found myself defending managers quite consistently simply because I think most of them have been set up to fail over the
Yep.
past few years. And I was like, when Ten Hag won the FA Cup, I think a lot of people did want him to stay, but there was obviously a fair degree of people who were like, no, I've seen enough, get him out and make the change now. Turns out that was a mistake to keep him. And obviously everyone can acknowledge that now. But I think there was a prevailing argument at the time that Ten Hag and every manager before him, like Mourinho said, finishing second with United is one of my greatest achievements. That kind of alludes to the fact that everything above that manager, whoever it's been over the last few years, Van Gaal said it as well, they're a commercial club rather than a football club. That every manager that has been at United over the last few years, whether you think they could have succeeded or not, has had their hands tied behind their backs to a degree. And I don't think Ruben Amorim can turn that around in 6 months. Personally, I will be very much in the camp again unless something happens to make me turn. But what he's achieved elsewhere, the style of football that he's played elsewhere, in the Champions League and this kind of thing as well, I'd like to see United get to that point. So I'm more than willing to be patient, because I know that this is going to be a job which, yes, United need to turn up and make sure that they improve to a degree, but to get United back to challenging for titles like they've said that they want to do by 2028 and win the title by 2028, it will take some time. It'll take a lot of building, and like, you have to clear off bad contracts and this kind of thing and turn things around. But yeah, it's going to be. I feel like I'm saying this a lot. It's going to require a lot of patience in there. It will, and Amorim needs help. He does need help. So maybe I'll ask you now: how many more like first team signings A do you expect to happen this year, and B do you want to happen this year? Realistically, I guess.
Ooh, it's hard to see a striker coming in, but one will definitely come in. It's hard to pick who that is. I'd love another midfielder to come in, because I just think they're missing a particular profile, which is probably someone more athletic who can cover a lot of ground, who can partner the likes of Kobbie Mainoo, Bruno Fernandes, and probably relieve the burden on Kobbie Mainoo. I just think there's just a little bit too much expected of him at such a young age. I think people just get a little carried away with that expectation because of players like Lamine Yamal. He's just coming off his first season with lots of injuries. I also like a new goalkeeper. I think by the end of the season, we're operating with 10 players, either because of struggles in goal or struggles up front, or both. So you have to try and address both those issues. So I think, you can sign a pretty pricey player up front based on the sales. So just say Garnacho and Anthony are sold. Then you've got your striker, and then you can afford, if you can move on Onana, you can afford a mid-priced midfielder like a Hayden Hackney, and then like a Lamens or someone like that in goal. That's what I would like. Competition for Onana if he stays. Another midfielder, regardless of what happens. That smoke around Casemiro and Saudi has sort of gone to nothing. It wasn't super credible from people who are talking about the Saudi sources. So, whether it's Ollie Watkins, who I really like because I actually think he fits really well with Cunha, Bruno Fernandes, and Mbeumo for his aerial ability, his ability to get on to the end of passes, getting around the back of defenses. So, yeah, I think you probably need to bring in a minimum of 4 players and then see what happens with the goalkeeper. What about you?
Pretty much the same. I've got to be honest. I think it's look, not every player has to cost 50 million quid either.
That's a change, right? That's a change we want to see.
I would like Christopher Vivell. I have real good hopes for him because I know I've tracked him for a long time. Like even when he was in like the Red Bull roles that he was in, you kind of get to learn, like working in the industry, you get to learn who these key people are pulling off these deals, and you look at the players that he identified to bring into that Red Bull system and where they are now. Like, you look at and I'll take Bournemouth as an example. Like last year, signing Dean Howson for 12 million quid or whenever it was. I think it was last year, wasn't it? And then selling him a year later for 50 odd million quid to Real Madrid. Like, clubs like Bournemouth and Brighton have been doing that really well over the last few years. Why can't... It's a completely different level of pressure, obviously, but if you have the right mentality, and you got to get to know the personalities of players through scouting and like through asking people who are close to them and this kind of thing. Alex Ferguson was obviously fantastic at that, and the way that Manchester United was, understanding the personalities of players before you brought them in was a key factor. Maybe United have lost that a little bit, but there are players out there in failing in other clubs who have all the right tools to, maybe come in and be part of a squad and can maybe grow into a role, and just because physicality and Manchester United's team in the Premier League, they just don't fit together. I think there's more players that you can bring in, probably for good value, bargains to pick up from certain places, and as much as players have to be really out. You mentioned Hayden Hackney there. I think he's a really smart fit, but is that a fit that United are going to look at bringing in? I don't know. That's more, it strikes you as more of a deal that maybe one of those mid-range clubs will do. Give him a year, he's worth 50 million or 60 million quid, and then United are usually that club on the other end of it trying to buy him for that much money. So I think United need to get smarter at that, and I do have optimism that with the new installation of the people that are in there making these decisions, that they will pull more of those off.
Yeah, I think so. And probably this summer we can't do everything at once. So can't bring in all those bargain signings that we want alongside bringing in first team quality. And I think first 11 quality is the absolute premium thing that we should be doing this summer, because that was such a big issue. Changing the athletic profile of the team because we were so physically barren last season. We're just getting destroyed in the Premier League. It was the clearest weakness the team had. Teams would just beat us up and run all over us. And that's the change you'd have to make. And then moving forward, you want to see those smarter signings, your Sekou Kone's a slightly higher level than that. Players who are ready to come in the first team or be on the fringes straight away. So I think, Kone's likely to go out on loan this season. It's being reported for going to Lausanne. You want to see more of those moves moving forward. We also can't address every single position. So would love to sign a centre back. Probably not realistic for another year. We'd love to spend big on a central midfielder. Probably not realistic for a year. And we need wing backs, probably another wing back. But again, probably not realistic for a year. It just can't all happen at once. We don't live in financial fairy tale at the moment. It's more of a horror show. And yeah, again, come back. It just takes some time.
It will take some time. Indeed. Any final comments? I'll wrap it there. I think just because I said we'd take 40 minutes, it's now been 44. But look, obviously, I think we both need to get on with things. But it's been an absolute pleasure. And any final parting words from you? We've preached the patience line quite a lot throughout this.
Oh, I'm back on the patience line. So if you are angry right now about Manchester United, just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath. It's not going to change today. It's not going to change tomorrow. You'll be angry enough when the matches come back. Hopefully not. But enjoy the break. It's exciting that we're bringing in new players. Exciting that things are changing. But it's also shit where we are. So try and make the best of it at least a little bit. That's what I try to do. You can have standards, but also be realistic about where the club is. You can demand the best, but also understand how long it's going to take to get back there. And,
and the
no, I'm really glad
as well.
Yeah, I'm really glad for like-minded fans like yourself, and Ed, and all the people who do their best to explain it without getting called sympathizers or somehow pro-Glazer, which makes no sense at all.
Yeah, crazy, honestly.
Yeah, I asked for examples. No one could provide one example of where I've ever said anything pro-Glazer. So, thanks for having me on. It's a real honor. I've really enjoyed it. Rob was someone that not to harp on something that's really sad, I know with just a year gone by, but Rob was someone who gave me a lot of advice in my early days. One day was telling me I picked too many fights. Haven't really learned from that one, unfortunately. But he gave me a lot of advice in the early days of my media career and my writing. And it's just an honor to be on. Remember our first interaction was me saying how much I enjoyed the podcast. And you actually said, would love to have you on sometime. And so here we are. So, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Now, thank you very much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I think obviously this has been going for a long time now, the pod. Trying my best to kind of keep it going. And it's difficult at times though. Like bouncing off Rob was fun, sometimes frustrating, because as much as he would tell you something like that, he did a bit of it himself as well. But it was, a pleasure to kind of be alongside him the whole time, and to know that like people have followed the podcast for a long time as well is really meaningful. And like I said, did want to, of course, have you on at some point, and it took it maybe a little bit longer than I'd anticipated or expected, but a pleasure nonetheless. Thanks for joining. And just one reminder again, where can people find you?
Yep. Adam Joseph 4_ on Twitter, on Instagram, but like I'm private. I won't accept your request. But yeah, no, follow me on Twitter. We can hopefully not argue about stuff, and I won't have to be short and snappy with you. But thanks again. And thanks to everyone who watched.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the pod today. Something slightly different from what I'm usually bringing you at the moment. But please subscribe to the Promised Land podcast if you've not done so already. Spotify, Apple, YouTube as well. Links are in the description of this episode as well. I'll be back soon for another episode, maybe talking about Manchester United having done something in the transfer window. Maybe Mbeumo has got the line that everybody seems to rely on nowadays as being the thing that means this is happening. Hopefully that happens at some point. Hopefully it's happened before you've even listened to this and we're slightly out of date. I don't know. But big thanks for everyone for joining. Big thanks to you, Adam, for joining as well. It's been a great chat, I think. And please subscribe on all the platforms necessary. And we'll see you soon for another Promised Land podcast. Until next time, thank you very much.